Hey everyone, let's just jump right in. Today we're exploring a topic that touches literally every single one of us, but honestly it's something we almost never talk about out loud. Welcome to this explainer on the deeply complex world of unpaid goodwill. We're going to look at the light, the shadow, and the incredibly hidden value of altruism. It's a super fascinating look into exactly why we give, what it costs us, and what we actually get in return. Okay, let's dive into this.
Okay, I want you to be truly honest with yourself for a second. Have you ever helped a friend out, maybe spent hours listening to their problems, completely poured your energy into supporting them, only to walk away secretly feeling just a little bit resentful? Like maybe you felt unappreciated because you didn't really get anything back. Well, if you have, trust me, you are not alone. There's this very real, very heavy friction we all experience. It's that clash between genuinely wanting to be a kind, good person and, living in a capitalist society where our time and energy are usually traded for some sort of tangible value.
To really understand this friction, we're going to look at a deeply vulnerable and honestly, almost embarrassing personal anecdote from our source material today. So the author spent 10 years acting basically as a free life counselor for their friends. They listened, they affirmed, and they helped guide these friends to success in their relationships and careers. But internally, the author was totally agonizing. They were wrestling with these dark, greedy thoughts, literally writing, "Oh, what a dirty heart I have. After all, if there is no reward, I am depressed. Why? They felt this immense guilt for just wanting some kind of return on their quote-unquote free goodwill.
And honestly, it's completely understandable why they felt that way when you look at the stark contrast. On one side, you have the massive amount of unpaid emotional labor the author provided. We're talking months and months of active listening, affirming, and actually coming up with concrete life solutions. And in return, the tangible rewards were basically a single can of coffee. Yeah. Sometimes friends would upgrade their phones and just casually hand over their old used smartphones or tablets. It got to the point where the author actually started wondering, wait, am I a scrap collector? Are they just giving me stuff they'd otherwise throw in the trash? That huge gap between heavy emotional lifting and severely disappointing physical rewards, that is incredibly validating for anyone who has ever felt like the unappreciated go-to friend.
So it begs the question, why do we do it? If the physical rewards are that terrible, why do human beings keep giving their time away? Well, psychology actually has an answer for this, and it's called the warm glow. It's defined as that heartwarming satisfaction and the rush of positive emotion we get directly from the act of helping someone else. In fact, international studies consistently show that people actually prefer giving their time over giving their money. Engaging in altruistic behavior, even when it comes at a huge personal opportunity cost, brings this profound sense of life satisfaction. It elevates our mood and creates those positive emotions that, honestly, money just can't buy.
Now, what's really interesting about this is trailing right behind that warm glow is a very real, very dark shadow. It's called compassion fatigue. See, when you empathize deeply with the suffering of others for too long, your mind and your body literally keep the score. It leads to this state of chronic stress, a deep sense of helplessness, and ultimately severe burnout. In the worst cases, it can drop you straight into total apathy. This completely validates the sheer exhaustion that comes from being the designated listener in your friend group. It proves that the burden of goodwill is a very real thing, and if we aren't super careful, our own empathy can actually consume us.
Now, while it's super easy to just view this as an intimate psychological struggle of one individual, we need to completely shift our perspective here. Let's zoom way out for a second, because unpaid goodwill isn't just some personal quirk or an isolated psychological phenomenon. It is literally a massive, foundational pillar of our entire modern society.
Just consider this staggering number, 30 million. In Japan alone, roughly 30 million people participate in some form of volunteer activity every single year. When you actually sit down and calculate the hours those people are putting in, it is equivalent to the labor of millions of full-time workers. Millions! Just imagine the infrastructure, the community events, and the vital welfare support that would instantly collapse overnight if those 30 million people suddenly decided, you know what, I'm going to stop giving my time away for free. And when we actually assign a hard economic value to that labor, like calculating what it would cost to pay for it using the alternative cost method, the number gets even more mind-blowing. 7.2 trillion yen. That is the estimated annual value of this shadow economy of goodwill in Japan. To put that into perspective, that is over 1% of the country's entire gross domestic product. This totally shatters the illusion that volunteering is just a nice thing to do. It proves mathematically that free work has immense, measurable value that literally props up our economy.
Let's move to and see how this builds back into our author's personal story. Remember those used smartphones and tablets they felt kind of insulted by? Well, they needed cash, so by month 2, they started selling those items on the flea market app Mercari. Now, at first, they were pretty annoyed by the hassle of it all. But by year 1, they were learning market forecasting, buying psychology, photography, and copywriting just to sell these items better. By year 2, without even realizing it, this person who was previously just struggling at home had acquired incredibly valuable real-world business skills. They realized that every single frustrating moment had actually been free tuition for a real business education.
And this brings us to an absolutely crucial reframing of how we view value. Society heavily biases us to believe that only tangible assets, money, cars, fancy watches, have real worth. We totally hesitate to pay for things we can't physically touch. But the author's so-called free labor was actively building a massive reservoir of intangible assets: trust, advanced communication skills, deep empathy, and profound wisdom. It's an incredible reminder that irreplaceable human capital is very often built right in the trenches of unrewarded effort.
And then, the big breakthrough finally happened. After wrestling with their own perceived lack of value for years, a friend looked at the author and said these truly transformative words: "Your deep wisdom is worth paying for." That single sentence completely validated a decade of unpaid labor. It totally erased the author's self-doubt. It proved that the invisible, intangible assets they had been accumulating all those years were deeply recognized and profoundly valuable to the people around them.
And this brilliantly illustrates the long-term rule of reciprocity. In our society, goodwill is actually a lot like raising a child. Think about it. A child doesn't thank you every single day for the sleepless nights or the endless sacrifices you make. But years later, maybe at their own wedding or when they have their own kid, they suddenly realize the immense effort you put in, and they come back to you with tears of genuine gratitude. While direct, immediate financial rewards for altruism are pretty rare, human reciprocity ensures that goodwill almost always returns to you over a long time horizon.
So, how do we actually live with this? How do we keep being good people without totally burning out? Well, the source material gives us 4 really practical tools to sustain our goodwill. First, actively value that inner satisfaction. Seriously, lean into that warm glow and recognize its massive benefit to your own mental health. Second, recognize your growing intangible assets. Realize that every difficult conversation is actually building your real-world skills. Third, set firm boundaries and practice self-care so you can avoid that dreaded compassion fatigue we talked about. And finally, maintain a long-term perspective. Treat your altruism like a savings account that just quietly compounds invisibly over time.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Look, altruism isn't always easy. The friction between giving freely and wanting something in return is just a completely natural part of the human experience. But if you keep leaning into empathy, if you keep accumulating that invisible wealth of wisdom and communication, one day the fog is going to clear. Someone is going to sit down right across from you, look you dead in the eyes, and ask this exact question: how do you understand me so well? And in that moment, you'll know for sure that every single second of your unpaid goodwill was absolutely worth it. I really hope this explainer helps you recognize the immense value you bring to the world. If you want to dive deeper into the economics and psychology of giving, definitely check out the source material. Keep learning, keep giving, and I'll catch you next time.